After the abrupt and heartbreaking cancellation of their 1993 tour, the Goo Goo Dolls spent nearly a year back in Buffalo, working odd jobs just to make ends meet.
I was nearing my 30s at that point. That sort of reality thing was sort of starting to sink in again, you know. I'm hearing these echoes of my father going, you know, you're making a mistake.
Then in the summer of '94, the Dolls got yet another crack at success. Warner Brothers offered to back their fifth album. But after nearly 9 years of hard knocks, the band was coming apart at the seams. By the time sessions for A Boy Named Goo got underway, John and drummer George Tatuska were barely speaking.
I was sort of the line of communication for a lot of years there, and it just became very unhealthy after a little while.
You know, this wasn't three happy-go-lucky guys anymore. You know, like having a laugh over the fact that somebody was financing their record.
Just weeks after completing the album, John reached his breaking point. Citing personal and creative differences with George, he quit the Goo Goo Dolls.
We were just totally becoming different people. It was like we really just couldn't even be around each other.
John called me and said that he thought he was just going to let them put the record out and we weren't going to tour, because he really didn't want to be in that situation anymore, you know? And that's when I started medicating myself.
Robbie wasn't about to let John give up on their dream without a fight. But there was no way John would continue without a change in the band's lineup. So push came to shove, and they fired longtime drummer George Tatuska.
This guy that I've been playing with for 9 years, you know, like, I had to go to his house and tell him, you know, he was out of the band. You know, it wasn't easy, you know, it was tough, it was a tough time.
Sometimes it's sink or swim, you know? And if we didn't do what we did, we'd have sunk right there, you know?
In January '95, John and Robbie left Buffalo for Los Angeles, hoping to find a new drummer and a fresh start. But in the wake of George's firing, John became deeply depressed. And after nearly 5 years of sobriety, he was drinking again.
We just felt like such heels for making that call, and it was a lot of guilt and a lot of emotion involved in that breakup.
After a 24-hour binge, John and Robbie pulled themselves together and scheduled auditions for a new drummer. Their first candidate was Mike Malinin, a 27-year-old Texan.
We just got in the room and started playing, and they were like, well, what do you want to play? And I remember the first song I said, let's play Falling Down. And then I started calling out other stuff, went through all the records.
It felt good. He seemed like a cool guy. Me and Robbie went out in the hallway, and we
said, you think, like, together we could kick his ass? Like, not one at a time, but, like, together. Like, we take him down? He's like, probably. He thought about it for a second. Yeah, we might as well just set up a gig, you know?
In March of '95, Warner Brothers released A Boy Named Goo, and again, sales were sluggish. The band crisscrossed America hoping to get their music heard, but few were willing to listen. When the Dolls showed up at a gig in Augusta, Georgia, the silence was deafening.
Our name wasn't on the marquee. The guy that owned the club said, oh, I didn't even know you guys were playing. You know, I didn't know it was still booked, but, you know, sure, you can play, you're here. So we play, I think 8 people paid to get in. We played for like 45 minutes, and then one guy wanted his $5 back and yelled at us for the next 15 minutes. We didn't play long enough.
But in June of '95, all that changed, when Kevin Weatherly of LA's K-Rock decided to give A Boy Named Goo another listen. Tucked between a dozen driving rock tunes, Weatherly found something totally unexpected, a pop ballad called Name.
Wow, you know, that sounds pretty good. Hit the repeat button, listen to it like 3 or 4 times consecutively, and thought, wow, man, this is like a really good song. They are completely going, you know, for the wrong song. You know what, we put it on, put it in a good rotation, and it, you know, 3 or 4 weeks later, phone started ringing for it, and, you know, it took off.
Following K-Rock's lead, radio stations across the country picked up the song. Seemingly overnight, Name climbed into the top 10 and put the Goo Goo Dolls on the pop music map.
The amazing thing about that song is, like, that was like the most played song of that year on radio, period.
Name earned the Goo Goos a whole new audience of top 40 fans. But the success of the single provoked harsh criticism from their loyal punk following. Many accused the band of selling out.
It really hurt me that people thought that. I thought that everybody that came up with us would be happy that we actually broke through and like a real band got on the radio, you know, and you know, all this kind of stuff. But, I mean, you know, we got a lot of for that. We had to really accept the fact that there was no going back into the garage, you know. At that point, we had each other, and that was the most important thing. Robbie and I still had each other.
After gathering dust for months, a boy named Goo started flying off shelves, propelled by the success of the single called Name. Suddenly, a band that had never sold more than 100,000 copies of any record had an album nearing the 1 million mark.
All of a sudden, we were on 90210, and we were on, you know, Dick Clark Rockin' New Year's Eve, and we were presenting an award to Michael Jackson with Sandra Bernhardt. We can get a phone call returned, you know, 8 weeks earlier, you know. All of a sudden, it's like, you know, everything's happening.
This next band's been running around the underground scene for about 10 years now. They've been compared to the Replacements, and even our... Ladies and gentlemen, the Goo Goo Dolls!
The band made a triumphant return to their hometown in the spring of '96. April 13th was proclaimed Goo Goo Dolls Day in Buffalo, and 16,000 frenzied fans came to see a band that only months earlier had trouble selling out a club.
We came home, everybody that had backed us up for, you know, 11 years, you know, was there with us.
It just felt like such, like, hometown boys done good, you know.
That summer, the Goo Goo Dolls had even more reason to celebrate. On July 17th, a boy named Goo was certified double platinum. Now it seemed nothing could stand in their way. But the joy derived from their hard-earned success was soon dashed. In October '96, the band received their first royalty statement. Despite having sold over 2 million records, the Goo Goo Dolls learned they were $115,000 in debt. It was a painful lesson in the economics of rock and roll.
That was the only time I ever thought that we were actually going to stop. It just seemed that way. It was just like, okay, that's it. We have worked so hard. We sold millions of records. We haven't made a penny, and this is never going to happen again.
Next, the Goo Goo Dolls fight back.
When you have that level of success to make no money, I have to say that they were really angry.
And later, writer's block stops John dead in his tracks.
I was like, man, that's the one thing I really did pretty good, and now I can't do it.
When Behind the Music continues. For the Goo Goo Dolls, the fall of '96 was the best of times, and the worst. The band was wildly successful, but flat broke. The single, Name, cracked the top 10, and the album, A Boy Named Goo, had sold more than 2 million copies. But instead of receiving a fat royalty check from Metal Blade Records, the Goo Goo Dolls were informed they owed the label $115,000 in recoupable expenses incurred on their behalf.
When you have that level of success to make no money, I have to say that they were really angry.
They may have been angry, but the fact remained. The band entered into their contract with Metal Blade willingly, against the advice of their lawyer. Now, determined to get out of the agreement they signed back in '88, the Goo Goo Dolls hired veteran entertainment attorney Peter Paterno.
It wasn't so much as that the Metal Blade was stealing money from them overtly. They'd stolen it with ink and paper. The contract was just so unfair. Their royalty rate effectively netted them about 30 cents a record, which is really, really low. I mean, you know, beginning artists get 3 times that much or more.
In November '96, the Goo Goo Dolls filed suit against Metal Blade Records, accusing the label of signing naive musicians in their early 20s who had no knowledge of or experience in the music business to a grossly unfair, one-sided, and unenforceable contract. Metal Blade's attorney, Bill Barrell, denies the band's claims. He says the terms of the contract and the royalty rate were more than fair.
The band, I think, naively assumed that just because they'd sold, in their mind, 2 million records, they were entitled to a substantial sum of money, which was entirely untrue.
Moreover, Barrell claims Metal Blade had yet to recoup the investment the label had made in the band during their 8-year relationship.
The more money you take in the form of advances for recording costs, tour support, video production, and everything else that's recoverable by the record label, it is a two-way street. The more money you spend to try and perpetuate your career, the more money your record label has to recover before they can pay you royalties.
With attorney's fees mounting and little in the bank to show for their platinum success, the Goo Goo Dolls set out on a 4-month tour to finance their legal battle.
We wound up playing a lot of state fairs and stuff. We needed money, so we played the pig races, you know, and kicked ass, man. You know, saved up our nickels.
Then, in April of 1997, after 6 months of negotiating, the Goo Goo Dolls and Metal Blade Records reached an out-of-court settlement. The agreement stipulates that the terms of the settlement remain confidential.
The Goo Goo Dolls would then ultimately be signed directly to Warner Brothers. Metal Blade would receive certain monies and certain royalties from past and future Goo Goo Dolls records.
On some level, when it all got said and done, and there was a lot of bitterness there, I don't think Metal Blade were total jerks in the negotiation. They stepped up, they made a deal. It wasn't a horrible deal. They didn't extract any more flesh out of the Goo Goo Dolls than they'd already extracted, or at least beyond the pale.
After a stressful and emotionally draining year, John and Robbie moved to New York City in the fall of '97. There they hoped to write, relax, and disappear from the public eye.
We just felt like we had to escape. I just wanted to be completely anonymous. I wanted to be invisible, you know, and we were pretty visible in Buffalo, and it was kind of uncomfortable.
But New York City turned out to be anything but a retreat. John, feeling enormous pressure to follow up this successive name, developed a career-threatening case of writer's block.
It was the first time in my life after I had had a hit where it was just like, oh, I'm a songwriter and nothing else. I'm a songwriter and a hot dog vendor. I'm a songwriter and a bartender. I'm a songwriter and a peanut roaster. You know, it's like, I'm a songwriter. And it scared the hell out of me, you know?